Let the haul wars commence, BookTube. That's right, I got a book haul. And this book haul is not nearly as big as my last one, but it's a book haul nonetheless. I've divided up into nonfiction on this side and fiction on this side, so we'll get right into it and let the battle begin. So the first book is Neil Postman's How to Watch the TV News, and it's co-authored by Steve Powers. I've gotten quite interested in Neil Postman and his thinking. I do have an ebook of his most famous book, what's it called? The one about TV. I forget what it's called, but it's a tiny little thing, and I should read it someday. But then I have I hauled a collection of his essays last time, so then now I have another little Neil Postman book, which is his seems to be how his attempt on, or at least him and Steve Powers' attempt on trying to help you discern good news from bad news, or like what is genuine versus what is entertainment fodder. That's what he says here. They explain why TV news has become a cash cow, pointing to the symbiotic relationship between TV news and advertising. They also stress that anyone who relies exclusively on TV for his or her knowledge of the world is making a serious mistake. I guess you could probably stretch the argument today to social media. If you're getting all your news merely from social media, you're probably making a mistake. When did this book come out? This book was published 1992. So that's my first nonfiction book. My first cannon shot into the BookTube haul wars. My next cannon shot will be one of my favorite finds, actually, a book I've never heard of, but I'm very glad to have it. It's The Enlightenment by Norman Hampson. And it's another book on the Enlightenment. I love collecting books on the Enlightenment. I have a small collection already. This will just be added to that collection. It's a Pelican book. And the subtitle there says, An Evaluation of Its Assumptions, Attitudes, and Values. So, when was this published? A Pelican book on the Enlightenment. 1968. So this has got to be the oldest book I have on the Enlightenment. 1968. And then we have another intellectual history. This is The Discoverers by Daniel J. Borston. It's got a pretty neat cover there. And the subtitle is A History of Man's Search to Know His World and Himself, which is basically a highfalutin way of saying this is a study of how humans have thought about the world. It's like it's an intellectual history, yeah. And going through book 1 is time, book 2 is the earth and the seas. Book 3 is on nature. And then there's many different subdivisions along the way. This is a book from the 80s. I have seen this before at a used bookstore, but I did not pick it up at that point because I think at that time I had far too many books already that I wanted to buy. So I felt like I could pass this one by and find it again some other time, and which is exactly what has happened. I've found it again. I think the edition I had passed by was a hardcover though, so this is paperback. But I'm happy to pick it up. Then we come to a little mini hardcover here. This is Fundamentalism, and the subtitle is The Search for Meaning, and the author is Malise Ruthven, and this is basically a Oxford very short introduction book, but this is in its hardcover form. So this is like if you get the book on fundamentalism in the Oxford very short introduction series, this is the book that you'll be getting. I just found a hardcover version with a whole bunch of blurbs on the back for other books that this author has written. Yeah, we don't. And this book came out in early 2000s, 2004, which makes sense because fundamentalism was a big concern at the time in the early 2000s for obvious reasons. I do have another book that also came out in the early 2000s on fundamentalism, which is also quite short. So it'll be interesting to read them back to back and, I don't know, just see how the authors deal with the topic. Especially since this author seems to want to analyze fundamentalism in a different way, trying to complicate the topic, I guess you could say. So that's the impression I got from the description of the book. Next is A Little History of Religion, and quite literally a little history of religion. This is by Richard Holloway. I'm not entirely sure I would have picked this up if it weren't for the blurb on the back, because this is, I mean, it's a hardcover, it's a history of religion. I'm always interested in religious topics and books on religion, but just a little history, like, how can you write a little history of religion and have it be any good? But I guess I'll find out. But the blurb on the back here is a Diarmaid McCulloch, and I mean, the illustrations are on the cover are pretty good. All around there, you got all these illustrations, and then there's illustrations on the flaps too. I don't think there's no illustrations in the book. Then we got the apple and the snake. Oh, there is actually illustrations in the little spot illustrations. We got a little chapter on the Bible. I find how big is this book, anyways? This book is 230 some pages. So little is quite right, quite literal in this sense. And the book was published in 2016, and this is a Yale University Press book. And I've never heard of this author before, but apparently he's quite prolific because those are all his other publications prior to this book. I don't know if you've heard of this author. If you have, let me know. Is he any good? And I don't know. We'll see. I'll find out nonetheless. Oh, and another thing that I noticed about this book when I was looking at it is that it's a rare hardcover with the actual title on the front of the naked hardcover. So we've got A Little History of Religion in gold there, which I thought was kind of neat because most hardcovers these days, when you take off the dust jacket, they're incredibly bland and poorly made. Like, they're all just papery and I don't know. It seems hard to justify paying $30-some for a hardcover that's I don't know, not well put together, or at least not aesthetically pleasing. More nonfiction. This is Astrea by Francis A. Yates, and then the subtitle here is The Imperial Theme in the 16th Century, which is basically a fancy way of saying that this is a study of the monarchy in the 16th century. So in the 1500s, and it examines the Charles V, and it says examines the images and symbolism of European monarchy in the 16th century, and this book is from 1975, and I like that cover there. It's got a green, kind of oddly contrast between the green and the red there, but I don't know, maybe it works. So that's, and it's got also an inset of black and white illustrations. Black and white illustrations here. Photo inset. There's quite a few of them actually. So that's Astrea. Then we have an interesting book of philosophy. This is The Ethics of Identity. This is by Kawame Anthony Appiah. And I kind of find it weird how this illustration on the cover is extremely small, as if their program couldn't find a way to make this image a little bit bigger so that you could actually see what it is. But I don't know, because other than that, the cover is very bland, which I guess should be characteristic of philosophy, because I don't know, it's philosophy. But this book seems to be this book was published in 2005, and it seems to be a study of race, ethnicity, nationality, religion, gender, and sexuality, and it's an exploration. Well, here, I'll just read this little blurb here. So yeah, it lists all those out. In the past couple of decades, a great deal of attention has been paid to such collective identities. They clamor for recognition and respect, sometimes at the expense of other things we value. But to what extent do, quote-unquote, identities constrain our freedom, our ability to make an individual life, and to what extent do they enable our individuality? In this beautifully written work, renowned philosopher Kawim Anthony Appiah draws on thinkers through the ages and across the globe to explore such questions. So that's the ethics of identity. And then we come to probably the find of the day for nonfiction. This is Cast by Isabel Wilkerson, and then it's The Origins of Our Discontents, which is a Shakespeare quote. And they actually had two hardcovers of this there, and one of them was an ex-library copy, so I left that one behind and grabbed this nice one instead. But yeah, this was a huge book back in the day. It says Oprah's Club 2020, so it must have come out just before then. Yeah, it says the copyright says 2020. But yeah, this was a huge book back in the day that seems to be a study or an argument about how America has a hidden caste system based on race, I believe. And yeah, seems fairly monumental, and so I would like to give it a read. So this was a popular bestseller in the day, so I'm not averse to reading popular bestsellers, but I just like to take my time with them. I don't want to get caught up in the hype. So here I am trying to catch up, or I'm not trying to catch up to the hype. This is a book I would want to read to begin with, especially since this, I believe, made Steve Donahue's best of list for nonfiction that year, so it made #1. So that's what put it on my radar initially. So that's Cast, and I believe actually, if you're familiar with the thinker online, Helen Pluckrose, she recommended reading that book alongside another book called Blueprint, which I don't know the author. But I would like to read those two back to back. And the book Blueprint is about how humans are social creatures and how we form societies by coming together. And she thinks it's important to read Blueprint, which is like a positive view of society, and then reading Cast, which is like the negatives of society. Kind of reading them together helps you get a more nuanced picture of humans and how we live together. Next is a book I have not heard of, but the author I have. This is Reading Pictures by Alberto Manguel, and this is a history of love and hate. It's really just a study of paintings, really, or at least a study of how to read paintings. And because of that, it is, of course, lavishly illustrated with such paintings. Basically on every page, I think. Yeah, almost every single page has an image to it. They had the paperback and the hardcover, and I grabbed the hardcover here. And I have this author's book on reading. He has a history of reading, which I have, which is also illustrated. It's on my shelf, I think right over here, right over there. That's leaning over there. And I have not read it yet, but I would like to. And this seems like a perfect complementary book to that, so I picked it up. And then this last book is probably the most interesting nonfiction find, in the sense, I've never heard of this book before, but it's a study of an author and a book, and it's The Long Night, William L. Shire and the Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by Steve Wick. And it's exactly that. It's what the subtitle says. It's a study of William L. Shire and the writing of his magnum opus, The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, which is a big fat historical book on the Third Reich, and it's basically a nonfiction classic of the 20th century. And I have a copy sitting on my other bookshelves, not here, but I found, and then this book just seems to be a study of the author as a journalist in Germany at the time, and how it formed the writing of his book. So that seems like a fascinating subject for a book. It's not very long either, so it would be a perfect book to read alongside The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, or maybe as like a primer before I end up reading it itself. But I don't know, it seems I've gotten, as the year has gone along, I've gotten more into reading books back to back, like reading like in clusters where there's a certain topic that interests me, and then I'll surround it with other books, and then I'll just use that as a way to branch out and just to give my reading some flexibility that way, which I quite like. So reading this alongside The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich seems like a great way to just learn more, not only about the Third Reich, but also about William Shire and the creation of the book itself. Now that's it for nonfiction. Now we have the canon shots of fiction. Though maybe if you're not so prone to liking fiction, you will think these as, I don't know, catapults or something lesser than a canon shot. The first book is the only classic that I got. It's H.G. Wells' Invisible Man, and I know I can get this for free on Project Gutenberg, but I wanted this edition because I don't have any of these SF Masterworks, so Science Fiction Masterworks editions, and I think it looks kind of neat, so, and it was very cheap, so why not pick it up? Cover, and I think this will be an interesting read in conjunction with the memoirs of an invisible man that I have sitting on my shelf, which is I think it's underneath that stack, but I could be wrong. Yeah, so reading this in conjunction, since any book that talks about or that has an invisible man in it, certainly at least acknowledges the existence of this book. So then we come to another book that was on that world famous book reviewer, his best of and worst, or his best of fiction list since 1990. This is one of those books that was on that list, and this is My Name is Red by Orhan Pamuk. And if you recall, in my last contemporary fiction book haul, that I found the same author's book called Snow, and now I have his book here, My Name is Red. And I think the premise of this one is more interesting. This is about some sultan, a Muslim sultan in the 16th century wants a book that commemorates his reign, but he wants it to be lavishly illustrated. And I guess in the Islamic tradition, having illustrations is controversial, and not everyone, I guess, controversial in a religious sense. So having certain illustrations is like sacrilegious, and I guess that stirs up controversy and the basics of this plot. So, and I love that cover. Love this. There's the author there. But yeah, drop the cover and the spine. Then we come to a hardcover historical, it's another historical fiction, because I guess My Name is Red counts as historical fiction. This is Michael Faber's The Crimson Petal and the White. I quite like that title. And it's a nice big squat hardcover full of blurbs, and it's exactly uh, and well, it's a book about a prostitute who tries to rise ranks in society. I forget in what area, in Victorian England. And yeah, in 1870s London, we follow Sugar, who's a 19-year-old whore in a brothel, and she tries to, I guess, improve her social position from being a prostitute. So, and the premise of this sounds quite interesting, so I'll give that a read. Then we come to another book that was on the world famous lists of the famous book reviewer. This is Wicked by Gregory Maguire, and it says Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West. And if you notice here, the cover has two parts to it. So if you open it up, you get the full illustration here of the witch. So it takes the story of the Wicked Witch from The Wizard of Oz, from that classic Wizard of Oz, and then gives you the story from the perspective of the Wicked Witch and how she became wicked. And this is like a world famous book because it was made into a play and it was made into a movie, and so it's like a mega bestseller. Even this edition here says more than 1 million copies sold. So, very famous pastiche fiction. We have two more books, BookTube. Two more books to fire into the ethos of the BookTube Haul Wars and fire my shot and see where it lands. We got another hardcover. Well, the last two are hardcovers, and this hardcover is again an adjacent buy. The author was recommended by the famous book reviewer in two other books that one of which I found in my last contemporary fiction book haul, and this is Dvorak in Love by Joseph Skvorecky. And this is another historical fiction book. So it takes Dvorak, I believe that's how you say it, who was that famous composer, and situates and writes about him or his time in New York as the head of the director of the National Conservatory of Music. And this is in 1892 when he came to America, and it's about his love affair with America at the time, and it's supposed to be a comic historical novel. And the one thing I really like is the subtitle, because even though it doesn't have the subtitle on the cover, it has a subtitle here, and the subtitle is A Lighthearted Dream. I quite like that. And then the back here is loads of praise for the previous book, which I did haul in my contemporary fiction book haul. It's The Engineer of Human Souls. And the author, the most interesting thing I found is the author bio here, because it says like he's born in Bohemia, but he migrated to Canada in 1968, and it says he is now professor of English at Arundel College in University of Toronto, and yet this book was translated, and so was The Engineer of Human Souls. So it seems interesting that he's professor of English, and yet he's writing his books in Czech still. I guess I should say who the translator is. The translator is Paul Wilson, which I believe is the same translator of The Engineer of Human Souls, which I hauled last time. And then we came to the last book on this book haul. This is Damascus Gate by Robert Stone, and it's got the worm Ouroboros. I think I'm saying that right, but I'm probably not. But it's got where you got the snake that eats its own tail on the front here, and this is a nice hardcover, and it's got a whole bunch of events praise in the back here. And the most interesting thing, I think, is it's got maps. So if you take off the dust jacket here, this is a map of Jerusalem. And yeah, it's a map of Jerusalem. Then when you go to the back, you get a map of just Israel in general. Yeah, and this is northern and central Israel. So very nice, very interesting. And this book, is this historical fiction? I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, it'll be interesting to read this since it's got a contemporary feel to it in the sense where there's a violent confrontation in the Gaza Strip, which is looking back is kind of eerie. But this book was published. When was it published? If I could find the copyright page, 1998. And this book was also on the best of list for the for the famous book reviewers list for maybe it was 1998, maybe it was 1999. I'm not entirely sure, but this was on that list. So I got 3 books from the list of the famous book reviewer for best of fiction, and then I got a bunch of other fiction and a bunch of nonfiction. So that was my used book haul. That was my my parting shot into the haul wars on BookTube here, and we'll see if we get any response or if victory will be mine. So that's it for now, BookTube. We'll see you next time.